All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are hosting our very first virtual wine tasting for Thrive Market Wine Club. My name is Alicia Angulo. I am the wine category manager here at Thrive Market. And today I am joined by our master sommelier, Josh Nadell, who will be walking us through our latest iteration of Thrive Market Wine Club, which is our summer picks. So we have summer wines that we want to share with you today. If you are watching this and you're not familiar with Thrive Market Wine Club yet, welcome. This is our newest addition to the wine assortment. We are so excited to be able to share our favorite wines with you specifically for summer. But just to go in a little bit about Thrive Market Wine Club, this is a great way for our members to discover our organically or biodynamically farmed wines, save 10% with each shipment. And on top of it, you get access to a virtual tasting with Josh, who is here with us today. So we are going to walk through our summer wines first and foremost. I'll pass it over to Josh so he can walk us through the latest iteration, answer questions, and we will kick things off. So I'll hand it over to Josh to get it started for us.
Thanks so much, Alicia. So very excited to be bringing these wines to you today. And what we'll do is, of course, you don't have to open all 6 wines at once, but we'll go through all 6 wines today in the following order. We'll start with the sparkling rosé, the cava, and then we'll taste the whites first. So we'll go through and we'll taste the Chilean Sauvignon Blanc, and then we'll taste our white blend from the Côte d'Aron, and then our Asado Cruz Chardonnay, and then we'll taste our 2 reds afterwards, the Boissellier Brouilly and the Ciboulot Monastrell from Spain. And when we take a look at these wines together, we'll talk a little bit about what makes them so special, where they're from, how they're grown, how they're made, where they fit a little bit into the world of that grape or that region, how you might want to pair them with a little bit of food, or just, of course, drink them on their own. And I'm so happy to answer any questions for you and engage in further discussion about wines, but at the same time, I'll try to keep it, try not to get too classroom on anybody here and keep it a lot of fun. And the first thing that we'll do is, I thought it would be a good idea. I get a lot of questions from friends or in restaurants or from family about what is the right way to open a bottle of sparkling wine. So I thought, since we're going to be tasting the first wine, it's always great to start with bubbles, which is our Gran Amigo, Cava Brut Rosado. And I thought it would be fun to kind of put myself on the spot and open this in front of everybody here. So let's give it a whirl, and maybe you'll learn something, and maybe you just say, I know how to do that, but we'll go through it just kind of a little bit slowly together. And the first thing is, cutting the foil off the top, those little kind of foil tabs and things like that sparkling wine provides to you, they're kind of notoriously unreliable. So by all means, don't feel bad about using your wine opener to kind of cut that foil the way you normally would on a normal bottle of wine. So there you go, poof, and it's off. And then you've got your little cage here, and you kind of want to swing that little tab out, and you want to open it. And at this point, I'll put a little kind of napkin or serviette over the top, but you want to open it. It's 5 or 6 twists, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5. And then you kind of want to just make sure you're pointing it away from your own head and your friends. And what you want to be doing here is you want to be twisting the bottle. You don't want to be yanking the cork out. You just want to kind of have your thumb on the top of the bottle like this. I like to grip the cork also with my index finger and just kind of turn the bottle, and the natural pressure inside the bottle is just going to kind of push that cork out for you. So you don't have to yank it out or anything like that. I'd say that was a fairly successful. There's no sparkling wine, no cava on my ceiling. So I'd say that's a win there. So I'm going to go ahead and pour myself a little glass of the sparkling rosado. And I'll kind of get right into here. What makes cava special? What is cava? It might be something that you've kind of heard of. Maybe you drink some champagne or Prosecco and you're kind of wondering where cava fits into that grand scheme of things. So just a brief introduction to what cava actually is. There's a lot of sparkling wine made around the world. Champagne is made in a particular method, And only champagne grown and made inside Champagne can use the word champagne. Think of it as like a trademark, protecting their product and protecting their origin. Cava is made in exactly the same way, the same production methods, many of the same rules and laws to Champagne itself. It's just made outside of that particular protected region, inside the country of Spain. Inside Spain, 90-something% of Cava that you're ever going to drink comes to the Northeast, not far from Barcelona, but it's actually a style of wine which you could, in theory, make anywhere in the country, provided you follow those production methods. And those production methods involve a second fermentation inside the bottle, which is not present in some popular wines like Prosecco or Lambrusco, which are very, very tasty, but they're just made in a little bit of a different way. So that's a little bit of a story about what Cava is, where it's from, and where it kind of fits into this little jigsaw puzzle of the world of sparkling wine. Now, how does Rosado or Rosé get pink? Because when you press the juice, when you're making this wine, it's clear. So it gets pink by either a little bit of contact with your red grape skins, or you actually add in a little bit of red wine to your clear juice during the winemaking process. And that's actually the way most sparkling rosé becomes pink. And that's the way that this particular wine becomes pink. So let's talk about this wine in particular. These grapes are grown organically, which is very important when it comes to wines that we believe in. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of sniff here. One of the things that makes this wine very special is it's made entirely from Pinot Noir. And if you were to go around the world and take a look at all the different sparkling wines, there are a precious few that are made entirely from Pinot Noir. A little bit in France, maybe a little bit of North America, a little bit in Australia, but the wine, sparkling wine made entirely from Pinot Noir often represents the highest quality and the most ambitious wines from a given winemaker's or domain's portfolio of wines. Pinot Noir is a little bit finicky in the vineyards. It's difficult to handle. It doesn't really respond too well to stresses of Mother Nature, inclement weather, and things like that. So to find a 100% Champagne method Pinot Noir sparkling wine is particularly special and particularly interesting. This particular wine, if you give it a little bit of smell, it kind of smells quite a bit like rosé champagne to me. And it has some bright, fresh red fruit flavors. Not overly juicy, but it's definitely present in there and quite pleasant, kind of jumping out of the glass a little bit. And they're just very fresh and very refreshing red fruit flavors. And if you look at the color, it has a little bit of kind of a salmon pink to it. There we go. A little bit out of a white over a white background there. There you go. A little bit kind of like a salmon skin to it, not super hyper pink. And that's because of some of the aging laws that are present in Cava, similar to Champagne, where there's quite a bit of aging in the wine before it actually leaves the winery, which adds to its complexity and length and weight to it. So in tasting the wine, it's crisp, it's mouthwatering. It really gets my mouth watering over here. When I think about acidity in a wine, I think about kind of like low acid kind of stops over here. Super high acid is kind of like I ate a sour candy, you know, or drank some lemonade without too much sugar, and it goes all the way up to here. And this one really gets my mouth salivating. At the same time, it's very well balanced. It's not austere or too lean. This is a perfect wine, I think, for summer afternoons, summer evenings. I think this really pleases a large crowd of people if you're having a bunch of friends over or a small dinner party, or obviously even if you're just hanging out, by yourself or whatever. But it kind of crosses the overlap in the Venn diagram of this wine as far as when you can drink it and who you can drink it with and what the occasion really calls for, from a picnic to a dinner to a patio, because of that balance, because it's so refreshing, is really great. Another thing I'd like to add about this particular Rosado and Cava Rosado in general is that it has kind of savory notes to it. It's not just bright, super juicy, fruity fruit. And those elements that come from the aging in the winery before the bottle is legally allowed to be released really complement food very well. To the point where every once in a while I'll take out a sparkling rosé, particularly this one, with food coming off the grill or some savory salads or entree salads and things like that. So in addition to the things that you probably think of when it comes to sparkling rosé, celebrations, warm weather, al fresco, general thirst, sparkling rosado and sparkling rosé like this can really complement cuisine a lot better than you might expect. Might provide some fun surprises for you and your friends. So that's a little bit about the Gran Amigo Brut Cava Rosado that we have right now. And I hope you drink lots of it this summer because I know I am. So cheers to that. So we're going to move on from the Rosado. Put this down here. I'm just going to kind of dump my glass out and give it just a little bit of a rinse. You know, you don't have to get too crazy in terms of washing, polishing, buffing glasses in between everything when you're trying to taste some wine. I just like to have one glass on hand for white and one glass for red. And generally, if it's Rosado, it's going to go into that glass that I've used for white and just give it a little rinse and you're good to go. So the next bottle we're going to try is our Chilean Sauvignon Blanc, the Grey Zorro Sauvignon Blanc from Chile. And there are a lot of really interesting things and special things about this wine which make it unique. The first of which is that this wine is organically farmed in one of the highest quality, most historic, and most noteworthy regions in Chile called the Maipo Valley. And it's farmed by a family that's been actively participating in agriculture and winemaking since the 1930s. So there's a tremendous amount of history here. And there's a tremendous amount of attention given to the way that the grapes are farmed and their practices in the winery. When it comes to Sauvignon Blanc is a little bit of a chameleon. It's grown in France, it's grown in Chile, it's grown in South Africa, it's grown in New Zealand, it's grown in North America, grown a little bit all over the world. But each part of the world, Sauvignon Blanc kind of adjusts a little bit to its surroundings, and it gives you a little bit of something different. The Sauvignon Blancs of New Zealand give you massive aromatics and tropical fruits, and really not so much of those kind of grassy, greener notes that you find in, let's say, the Sauvignon Blancs from France per se, or different parts of the world. And Chilean Sauvignon Blanc, to me, occupies this really kind of Goldilocks place in between those incredibly fragrant wines from New Zealand and a little bit kind of more of the crispy, nervy, stony Sauvignon Blanc that is very popular inside France. This Sauvignon Blanc is made entirely in stainless steel, which preserves the natural aromatics and makes sure that the wine is really unadulterated and gets to you in kind of the most pristine form. There's no oak or anything like that. So let's give the wine a little bit of a swirl and a sniff. I always like to look at the color of my wines just to kind of see what's going on, a little bit of a force of habit from my exams and the restaurant industry and things like that. And you'd be surprised, a lot of times the appearance of wines forms a little bit of our opinions. It starts to, well, you know, it really says, well, is it going to be full-bodied, light-bodied, oaky, not oaky, who knows? But just like with our food and our cocktails, and why do we love taking pictures of things so much? It's because the visual of wine starts to inform our mind and our impressions. So get a little bit of swirl. It's got a really kind of clear, bright, crisp primary appearance. That to me speaks of the youth and the freshness of the wine and the fact that it does not have any oak aging on it. Let's give it a sniff. And to me, again, one of the things that attracted me to this wine in particular was it is classically Sauvignon Blanc aromatics, where you have some really fantastic kind of lime zest, lemon zest, kind of grapefruit. It's very citrus. It's not tropical. It's not kiwi, banana, mango, and it's not kind of orchard. It's not apple, pear. It's zesty and fresh. And underneath that are a little bit of green things. And green things to me are kind of like freshly torn garden herbs and shisos and cilantros and parsleys and things like that. And that's part of Sauvignon Blanc. That's part of the DNA of Sauvignon Blanc. In fact, Sauvignon Blanc is actually a parent of Cabernet Sauvignon. And that's one of the things where if you get a Cabernet Sauvignon from a cooler climate, you'll notice some greener things going on in there. So that's a little like kind of like a little tidbit there for you if you want to amaze your friends and family at parties. So I'm smelling the wine. It's aromatic. It's fresh. I want to focus a little bit as we go through these wines on body, texture, and flavor. And to me, these three things are really what inform people's likes and dislikes about wine, or why they might choose a specific wine at a specific time to go with their food or their mood. And to me, this wine has a light body. And for those of you who might struggle with what does body mean in a wine? It's like wine and whatever, skim milk, regular milk, heavy cream, light body, medium, full body. It's kind of like the perception of weight on the palate as you kind of experience it and your mouth kind of reacts to it, right? So it's a light bodied wine, but it's there. It has a very crisp texture to it. Not maybe quite as lean as that Cava was, but it's kind of in that territory where it's kind of does get pretty zippy up here, light bodied, crisp, bone dry, very refreshing. I just, drops my body temperature by 5 degrees. Perfect. I just immediately start thinking about salads, young cheeses, seafood, aperitivo hour. Maybe when I'm starting to cook some food, I can sip on this on a glass. It really gets my juices flowing in my palate. And the flavor to me is very similar to kind of that aromatic experience I just had a moment ago. Those kind of citrus zesty things really pop. I'm getting a lot of kind of like lime and lemon zest as if I was using a microplane grater, maybe a little bit of a peel of a citrus fruit, and then a little bit of those grassy green things. However, it really occupies the middle of the road. It doesn't go into, and for those of you who love New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and we have a great one on site, it doesn't go into the super passion fruit, kiwi, tropical world. And it doesn't go into entirely the freshly kind of mowed lawn, super green, kind of like you're going like this with a bunch of parsley or cilantro. It's just kind of right in the middle. And for me, this particular Chilean Sauvignon Blanc really occupies that kind of perfect middle ground between those two styles of Sauvignon Blanc that are already very popular on their own. So that's why I'm particularly excited and drawn to this organically grown Sauvignon Blanc from a very historic family in a fantastic region of Chile. So that is a little bit of my tasting note on the Grey Zorro Sauvignon Blanc from Chile, from the Maipo Valley. So I'll just kind of pour out my extra there. And we're going to move to, my little engine that could wine, the Côte de Rhône Blanc from Ethics Drinks, the Éclosion or Éclosion. My French is not that great in terms of its pronunciation. So for those of you out there who are native French speakers or speak French well, I am sorry, I'm doing my best. This wine, the Rhone Valley Côte de Rhône, is reasonably present in American wine shops and American wine restaurants, and people seem to be familiar with the Rhone Valley as a region. However, a lot of those wines that make it here, and most of the wine produced, is red. And the white wines from the Côte de Rhône in this area of France, which is a sunny, warm, consistent, and temperate region in France, often are blended with many grapes together. That's the tradition of this area. And because of that blend, each grape really gives the best of itself to the blend, and the blend becomes a fantastic, the expression, I think, greater than the sum of its parts or something like that, right? So you have four, not eight, four fantastic grapes. And they might not be grapes with which we're that familiar because they often are not bottled on their own. You have Clairette, Marsanne, Viognier, and Grenache Blanc. And each of these grapes is chosen for what they give to this particular wine. Ethics Drinks is a phenomenal winery partner for us. Most of their grapes are certified organic. If they're not certified organic, they're put through rigorous lab testing. They're a carbon neutral company, plastic free. So really a lot of these core values, which are important to us at Thrive Market, are represented by this fantastic winery. If you notice the color of this wine, it's got a little bit more pigment to it than that Chilean Sauvignon Blanc that we just had. And that's not necessarily because of any oak or age or anything like that. That's just because the grapes themselves give a little bit more from their skins into the color of this wine. And what a lot of people don't realize actually, and this is kind of like another little second level nugget, is that most of the flavor, the aroma and flavor in any wine you're ever going to have really comes from the skins. The layer of the grape skin has not only the color in 99.9% of the time, but it also has the aromas and the flavors. So there's just a little bit more in these skins just when it comes to a little bit of color that comes along with those flavors and aromas. So let's give this wine a little bit of a taste. Well, smell first. And I'm a little bit biased because I really love this wine and I want more people drinking Côtes du Rhône Blanc. So it has a very attractive but not overwhelming scent to me of some orchard fruits, maybe some slight florals to the wine. I don't really get much in the way of oak influence. My brain doesn't say vanilla or cinnamon or anything like that. And it also doesn't say citrus quite as much as the first wine did. So if you have two glasses, and it's always fun to kind of give yourself two glasses while you're tasting wine, because wines relative to one another are pretty cool, and all of a sudden things really start to pop. So it doesn't say lime zest to me. It doesn't say grapefruit. It says kind of like more pear, maybe a really delicious red apple like a Fuji or something. And it goes a little bit more into some kind of nice white or pink flowers like magnolia or things like that, but not an overwhelmingly floral scent. And again, you have a Viognier, which contributes a little bit of that floral aroma to it. You have Marsanne, which gives you a little bit of that more orchard fruit. You have Clairette and Grenache Blanc, which contribute a little bit more in the way of texture, which we'll find out in a second. So now that we've given a little bit of a sniff, we've talked about a little bit of what makes this wine unique in terms of the way that the four grapes come together in a blend. Let's give it a taste. Okay, so body, texture, flavor. There's a little bit more of a presence of weight to this wine than there was with that Chilean Sauvignon Blanc, or for those of you who just always gravitate to really light, easy drinking whites, Pinot Grigio or something like that. There's a little bit more of, I'm not skim milk, I'm not heavy cream, maybe I'm 2%, or maybe I'm kind of 4% or regular milk in this wine. And that comes from the weight of these grapes. And it comes from this kind of beautiful, sunny, warm, dry, temperate climate in which they're grown. So one of the reasons I love this wine is it's a phenomenal with food when it comes to white meats, or when it comes to kind of heartier salads and heartier vegetable dishes with a lot of flavor and things like that, because it has a little bit more of a medium body. Those orchard fruits are there, but not overwhelming. And the texture of this wine, that Sauvignon Blanc was all the way up here on the earlobes. That Brut Rosado was nearly all the way up to here in the earlobes. This wine really stays down here. So I would describe this wine as a little bit of a rounder, softer, less lean, less mouth-watering wine. It's bone dry and it's delicious and it's clean and refreshing, but it doesn't quite have that level of acidity that shocks your palate into restabilizing by watering and by sending all of that saliva to your palate. So white meats, again, big salad, even if you're drinking white wine with some really heartier foods and things like that, or foods that have a lot of seasoning or some pretty bold things going on. I love this Côtes du Rhône Blanc with it, and it is very, very difficult to find this type of wine from this place, grown like this and made like this, at this value. So it's a wine from a region known for reds, which really which I hope surprises some of you in terms of its drinkability, its versatility, and how delicious it is. And I was so excited when we were able to find this wine and get it on site for everybody. So I hope it's a little something new for everybody. I hope the difficulty in pronouncing the name doesn't throw you too much for a loop, because I'm really just so happy with it. And it's drinking even better today than it was 6 months ago, which is very exciting. Okay, our last white wine comes from a grape which I think a lot of people are more familiar with, very similar to the Sauvignon Blanc, and that's Chardonnay. Chardonnay has some similarities in the way that it's grown all over the world, like Sauvignon Blanc. However, Chardonnay itself is a very neutral variety. It doesn't really have those kind of intrinsic citrus and grassy things that Sauvignon Blanc has. It doesn't necessarily have those, floral things that a wine called Gewürztraminer might have, if you're familiar with that, or those dark fruits necessarily that, in red wines that a Cabernet may have. It's a fairly neutral varietal, almost in the same way that Pinot Grigio is. However, depending on whether you grow it in a cold climate or warm climate, or kind of stony, chalky soils, or more fertile soils, just like if you were growing oranges, your oranges would be deliciously sunny and ripe if they're growing in Florida, but if you're growing them in Virginia or somewhere cooler, they wouldn't quite get there, and they'd be a little leaner and not quite as juicy. So Chardonnay is kind of the same way. Wine grapes are the same way. The Asado Cruz is grown in one of the greatest growing regions in Argentina called Mendoza. Within Mendoza is a little area called the Uco Valley. And then within the Uco Valley is a little area which has been further defined as one of the greatest growing regions called Tunuyán. Definitely pronounced that incorrectly, but I'm doing my best to. So this Chardonnay is grown from another grower who grows their wine organically. And if you take a look at the color, you'll notice this is probably slightly more golden than anything we've had before, at least the way it's kind of coming through for me in real life. And that's going to be very much an indication of the way this wine is made, in that there is some oak influence on this wine. And when you put juice inside of an oak barrel, there's a little bit of color that gets into the wine. So aromatically, there's an immediate difference to this wine compared to the other two that we've tried. And there's a little bit kind of a butterscotch, there's a little bit of vanilla, there's a little bit of kind of like a dried cinnamon that goes along with these kind of really nice, agreeable, familiar orchard fruits that Chardonnay is really known for. The wine actually does go in, about half of this wine goes into oak, while the other half stays in stainless steel. And by making the wine partially in oak and partially in stainless steel, you preserve the freshness of the Chardonnay grown in this particular place. And then by aging a portion of it in oak, you give a little bit of that delicious oak flavor that a lot of people gravitate towards when they're choosing Chardonnay, which has made Chardonnay so successful and so famous. But by only doing half the Chardonnay in there, it makes sure that oak isn't too overwhelming. And it makes sure that it's very well balanced and integrated with the freshness of the wine, the portion of the wine that was aged in stainless steel. Let's give this wine a taste. So body, texture, flavor, a little bit more weight to this wine than that Côtes du Rhône Blanc. And that comes from the use of oak and the Chardonnay in general, grown in this fantastic climate, these high elevations, which are one of the things. It's windy and dry up here. That really allows a lot of the viticulture and agriculture in this particular area of Argentina to be in alignment with those beliefs about organic farming, because you don't really need any chemicals or synthetics, because you're not fighting against too much fungus, or you're not fighting against too much inclement weather or weed pressure and things like that. So you have a little bit more of kind of like medium to full-bodied white wine. Texturally, the wine is rounder and softer. It's grown in a warm climate. A little bit of the use of oak barrels rounds the wine out a little bit. You have kind of hints of that kind of vanilla bean flavor and some of those kind of delicious brown baking spices that go along with those orchard fruits, those neutral orchard fruits you get from Chardonnay. And it's not too lean or racy. You know, if you love Chablis from France, this is kind of a little bit of a different style of Chardonnay. This is more of a Chardonnay for people who like wines from different regions of France or North America, Napa Sonoma, or Australia, and things like that, where the wine is a little bit softer, rounder, incredibly crowd pleasing. And again, a very judicious use of oak here, because only half the wine is aged in oak barrels during the winemaking process. So you have a fantastically balanced wine. It's not what a lot of people will refer to with California Chardonnay as a butter bomb or a super charred oaked kind of uber oaky Chardonnay. It's really just right in the middle here. So it goes well with all sorts of food. Chardonnay seems to be a wine that you can kind of just pull off the shelf at any point in time for a lot of different people. So cheers to the Asado Cruz Chardonnay. So we're going to move into reds now. Very complex move here by grabbing the other wine glass that I have. And the first red wine we're going to try is the Jean Boisselier Brouilly, which is a Cru Beaujolais from France. And I can assure you, I understand that was a mouthful of French there, but the wine is equally as delicious as this is a mouthful of words to say. And I have a particular place in my heart and my mind for Beaujolais, because unfortunately, these wines were really stigmatized for really a generation of Americans because of the less interesting, inferior versions of Beaujolais that were imported to the US during the 70s and 80s and early 90s. We were getting these kind of inexpensive Beaujolais Nouveau, which really are not meant to travel. And they don't represent the finest wines this region has to offer. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Beaujolais region, and then we'll talk about this wine in particular. The grape that makes the wines of Beaujolais, the red wines, is called Gamay, G-A-M-A-Y, very simple. It generally produces wines with a decent color to them, kind of a medium opacity color to them, but they tend to be light to moderate in tannin. For those of you who are looking for wines that are a little bit easier to drink or less textured, or kind of the opposite of a Cabernet and red wine, and you might find Pinot Noir something that you like a lot, Gamay and the great wines from Cru Beaujolais should provide you with a real opportunity for alternatives to that. And we'll taste this together and we'll talk about the slight differences. Now, Beaujolais is a very large region in southern Burgundy. And it's divided, like all French wine regions are, into little villages, little hamlets and things like that. And there are 10 individual villages, one of which is called Brouilly, which are called the Cru Beaujolais. And these represent the pinnacle of quality from within the region of Beaujolais. Cru Beaujolais is the best version of Beaujolais. Beaujolais Nouveau there's nothing wrong with it. It's fun, fancy free, it's easy, delicious, totally gulpable, but that represents the wines that are meant to be consumed in the first few months of their life. And then you have Beaujolais Village and Cru Beaujolais, and Cru Beaujolais is absolutely fantastic. So let's actually taste this particular wine from the Cru, one of those 10 villages, one of the more famous ones, called Brouilly. So the color of the wine, it's got some nice color to it. It's not a crazy deep colored wine, but I can kind of read through it a little bit. And aromas here are just bright and fresh, and it's kind of got the whole kind of berry basket in there, raspberries and blackberries, and they smell to me like the ripe versions of those berries. They're not cooked in a pie, and they're not that berry that I was kind of picking around in the box that I see that it's obviously not ripe and I'm going to eat it, it's going to be sour, and I wish that berry wasn't included in the box that I just got from the supermarket. It's kind of right in the middle and fresh and delicious, right off the vine. I don't get any indication here of vanilla or cinnamon or char or use of oak on this wine. And use of oak in red wines is really a major determining factor in those flavors and textures we're going to talk about in a moment, and why you might choose a certain wine in a certain place or for a certain person or with certain food. On the palate of the wine, again, body, texture, flavor, it's a little bit more than light-bodied wine, right? And the thing that really draws me to this wine, and a lot of the wines from Beaujolais in particular, is you have this kind of light to medium body and a moderate, low to moderate level of tannin. So when you think about when your mouth goes like this, almost like that thing that happens when you either burn your mouth because you eat pizza when it's too hot, or you have a crunchy baguette and you scratch the roof of your mouth, kind of up here behind your teeth. That's kind of where tannin happens. And the tannin on this wine, the texture of this wine is really agreeable. It's pretty moderate. And it's one of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, for those of you who like Pinot Noir, which is a lighter bodied, lower tannin red wine as well, this gives you that same kind of texture and same kind of versatility with food, but it gives you a little bit more kind of wild fruit and depth in its flavor. One of the reasons I really love to recommend Beaujolais with a lot of different types of food for people. I want to try the wine again. Not getting any flavors from oak. I'm just getting really refreshing, ripe, kind of perfect moment in time fruit flavors. Light, a little more than light bodied. The tannin is very well balanced with the acid. So I have a, really light to moderate tannin, and there's a little bit of mouth watering here. The wine is bone dry, but it's not austere. My palate doesn't need to recalibrate itself the way it would with a big Cabernet Sauvignon or a full-bodied high tannin or anything like that wine. It's just incredibly drinkable, but full of flavor. And I guess that's my whole point. If I could just kind of edit myself down to why I love Beaujolais so much and why I thought this wine was important for the catalog and why it's so perfect for summer. It's incredibly delicious and full of flavor and incredibly drinkable. And I'd also encourage, for those of you who like a little bit of a chill on their red wine, throw it in the fridge for an hour or whatever it is. Beaujolais, particularly cru Beaujolais, is delightful with a little bit of a chill on it. And there's nothing wrong with drinking chilled red wine. If you want to throw some ice cubes in your glass, more power to you. I'm making suggestions in terms of what I might think you and your friends will enjoy when it comes to wine pairings, but there are no rules when it comes to wine. You should drink your wine the way you want to, how you want to, when you want to, with whatever you want to drink it with. And Beaujolais is kind of a poster child for that entire little monologue right there. So I really hope you enjoy the Boissellier Brouilly. For summer and fall, Beaujolais is just one of my real go-to reds. So cheers to that. And our last wine of the day is a horse of a very different color when it comes to red wines. And this is a wine from southeastern Spain, from Jumilla. This is another wine where the kind of growing conditions allow mindful viticulturalists and winemakers to really work in an organic and very clean and healthy way. It's hot, it's dry, it can be a little bit breezy at times, but when it's dry, you don't necessarily have that weed pressure, which causes people to spray herbicides, which decreases competition with your vines. You don't necessarily have the need for fungicides because you're not fighting against humidity and you're not fighting against molds and things which can destroy a crop of grapes or really impact the quality. And for the most part, you're really not dealing with those kind of insect pests that you get a lot of different other places. So you're hot, you're dry, you're sunny, you've got a little bit of breeze throughout the Mediterranean. There really isn't too much of a reason why you can't start out with that kind of organic or biodynamic philosophy with agriculture. Winemaking is an entirely different story, but here we have another wine made entirely from organic grapes. This wine is made from a grape called Mourvedre, also known as Monastrell. And that's the word you'll see on the label here. It's the same grape. It's called Mourvedre in France, and you find it along the beaches of the Mediterranean, very famous region called Bandol. And it's also used in the very famous appellation of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, in the famous red wines from there. Again, it loves the sun and it loves the beach. It loves the sand, and it can thrive under these very hot, dry conditions. In Spain, they call it Monastrell. And if you kind of hold it out here, you'll see the color is quite a bit more opaque and intense than that Brie. That's because the skin of the Mourvedre or Monastrell grape has quite a bit more pigment, quite a bit more color inside of it. It's also very rich in antioxidants for those of you who are thinking about that portion of your drinking choices, all because of the qualities of that skin. So let's give this kind of dark wine a little bit of a sniff here. And again, if you have kind of like those two glasses and you want to go a little back and forth between these two, how about that, between the two wines, you'll immediately see, and this is something that I like to kind of just throw into the back of people's minds during a wine tasting, is condition of fruit, particularly when it comes to red wines, because you know, the difference between, I think it smells like a cherry, I think it smells like a blackberry. It's red wine, it's delicious. It's really a little bit subjective most of the time. But I think it's important when it comes to people's tastes and when you might choose a particular wine, the condition of the fruit. The Brie, for example, was just at the peak of ripeness of a fresh kind of, I picked the blackberry, I picked the raspberry, and I just washed it with water and I'm eating it out of it, and it's refreshing, and it's kind of going like this to me a little bit. The condition of the fruit in this wine, and it makes perfect sense because it's grown in the hot, dry, sunny regions of southeastern Spain, are quite a bit more sun-drenched and deep and dark and rich. Where the black cherries I'm getting are, I better eat these today, or maybe I've already thought about putting them into a pie or something like that. They are really dark and sun ripened, and even a little bit kind of like really hit by that sun. Not quite as on the verge of ripeness like the Beaujolais was, or right into fresh, really sun drenched. And there's a lot of that fruit going on. The intensity of the aroma of this ripe to overripe fruit is pretty intense. I'm getting a lot of information from this wine. On the palate, body, flavor, texture, it's not shy, this wine, right? It's at the very least kind of a medium-bodied wine, and depending on your kind of definition of kind of what a full-bodied wine is to you, it might encroach onto full body. I think it sits right in between, kind of on the edge of kind of what a full-bodied wine is to me, and it's full-bodied because of this depth and persistence of this real sun-drenched fruit. And the weight that this kind of climate gives you, it's got just a richness to it. It is not lean. It is not overly tannic. It's round and soft because it was so warm and so kind of delicious in the way that the wine was grown. And because there's not an overwhelming use of oak here, it allows those kind of really bold, dark fruit flavors to stay all the way through. And again, as I taste the wine again, it kind of stops here, right? So it's a wine that's soft and round, full of flavor, rich and bold with dark fruit, but a little bit rounder, softer, and easier to drink. It's not a wine that makes me for too long. It's got definitely a little more tannin than the Beaujolais did, but it's not a wine where my palate has to kind of, I have to kind of like reel and kind of come back to it. And one of the pairings and the reasons that we put this in this seasonal pack is because it's just so great with things coming off your grill, whether that be white meat or beef or pork or really anything. that will kind of accentuate and have these kind of dark fruit flavors pop out. And the richness of fruit in this wine and the purity of the fruit in this wine will further accentuate the savory notes, the grill marks, the char, or the marbling, or whatever is coming off your grill. This is another, excuse me, this is another wine that actually you could serve with some chill on it. My mind doesn't go right to it like it does with the Beaujolais, but I think a little bit of a chill on this wine, if you're sitting outside in the evening time having dinner, definitely would help the wine, and that dark fruit would really stay in balance. You could, if you have a basement, you could just leave it in the basement and take it out. Or if you just want to throw it in the fridge for an hour before you serve it and plonk it on the table, I think that would really, really help the wine show its best. So that's a little bit about this really kind of unique wine from southeastern Spain, made from organic Monastrell grapes, and how it might fit to your summer. So that concludes the 6 wines in the summer pack. I love questions. I'm happy to answer them in whatever format you'd like to send them over. And I really hope you enjoy these wines, because I know I did. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Josh, for walking us through everything. Very excited to have our first virtual tasting come to an end. We can't wait to see you guys again here soon. Our fall picks will be launching in September. So we hope you tune in again, and we will have another great tasting with Josh to walk us through the fall. We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.